It is 4:31. As co-chair of this Monroe County Community Justice Response Committee, I'm going to go ahead and call us to order. Today is April 3rd, 2023 at 4:30 p.m. If you have not received an agenda, please do collect one in the back there. And if you would like to offer public comment, please don't forget to sign up here. Judge Stafford is indicating the spot in which you sign up to give public comment. Let's go to item number 2 on our agenda, which is roll call. Ms. Mosier, would you please give the roll?
Yes. Commissioner Jones? Commissioner Thomas?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Commissioner Githens?
Yes.
Counselor Iverson?
Here.
Counselor Crossley?
Here.
Counselor Wilkes?
Here.
Judge Crothy?
Here.
Judge Stafford?
Here.
Sheriff Marte?
Here.
From the Prosecutor's Office, April Wilson?
Here.
From the Public Defender's Office, Michael Hunt.
Here.
All right, next is our statement of guiding principles, and that, for those of you in the Nat U Hill meeting, is on the back of your agenda. For those of you watching on CATS, that is found on the CJRC website, and so let me read that out. Recognizing our commitment to public safety, we will work collaboratively and transparently to, number 1, prioritize treatment over incarceration when appropriate. Number 2, build a justice facility that meets constitutional standards and treats inmates with dignity. Number 3, address inequities in race, economic status, disability, national origin, sexual orientation, and gender. And finally, number 4, reduce the number of people entering the criminal justice system and reduce recidivism for those who are or were in the system. And with that, should I hand it over to you, Commissioner Githens?
I thank you very much for taking over. I apologize for being a couple of minutes in arrears for getting here. In the middle of the afternoon, I received as did many of you probably, long email from Sheriff Marte. I would like to invite the sheriff and the members of the CGRC committee to come and speak with the commissioners at our work session on Wednesday, since we have a very full agenda for today. And that way we can be public and transparent as you requested.
I have a full docket on Wednesday and will not be available. I would request that we discuss it during the CJRC meeting, because the people who are here in the gallery today are here to hear these topics, and obviously Sheriff Marte and his staff are here. And I know that I have court. I'm guessing Judge Crothy has court. I'm guessing Judge Dekoff has court. I'm guessing Judge Fawcett has court. I'm guessing that Ms. Rundbeck, Mr. Hunt, and Ms. Wilson also have court.
Thank you. I will remind you that these are recorded so that you will hear. It seemed to me that Sheriff Marte's email was directed toward the commissioners, and so that's why I feel it's more appropriate at our work session. And I would like to move forward with today's session, please.
I forwarded to the committee because the committee needs to be aware of it, not only for the commissioners, but I also address it to the committee as well.
Yes, I'm aware of that. Yes. And I'm not trying to silence anyone here. Like I said, we are inviting you to come speak to us about everything that had happened.
And I certainly understand and respect the commissioner's decision, if it's a commissioners-wide decision to address this, not today, but at the work session. And I am, of course, appreciative that I can watch those meetings after the fact, but that's not the same as being able to participate in them as a member of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. That is solely from me. I have not had a chance to speak with my fellow commissioners, but was speaking as the president of the Board of Commissioners, who is allowed to, I think, help set the agenda for the work session.
Commissioner Githens, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
No, I'm sorry. I walked out for just a quick second, and even for just 1 minute, I feel like I just missed a whole lot. Can we just go over briefly what I just walked back into?
This afternoon, Sheriff Marte sent an email to me and to members of the CJRC committee, as well as to Chief Deputy Phil Parker and to Kyle Gibbons and Matt Demings. And so I had said that I invited him to come to the commissioner's work session on Wednesday to discuss the issues that he's raised, because we have a very full agenda today, and this agenda has been in part in place for over a month. So at this point,
This Wednesday, just came to mind, I am providing training, and I am the instructor, so I won't be there.
is
And I
there
had
ano-
brought up, I'm sorry, and I had brought up, Ms. Crossley, that I would prefer to address it now because I can't be there on Wednesday at the work session to listen to and participate in any conversation about it because I have court all day Wednesday. And I noted that the subject seemed germane to the people who were in attendance here today, as well as the members of this committee. Certainly, I understand I don't have a vote. There are no Robert's Rules of Order on this committee, but that was my preference, so I just wanted to state that I would like to hear from Sheriff Marte today. I don't know if Mr. Iverson, as co-chair of this committee, has a position on the agenda for today, but that's what I can do.
May I have the floor to ask a question? So in the email that I received, I count 30 paragraphs. I have not had the time to read all of the email today. So I have a quick question. And I believe, Sheriff Marte, this email was sent only to members on this body, is that correct?
That's correct.
Would it be appropriate to share the content of this with members of the public or the 3 media organizations that are gathered here today?
Yeah, we could be very transparent as far as I'm concerned.
All right. And I just for the purpose of today's meeting, I see no problem at all in hearing a summation of this very long email on item number 7 or any other, time during today. It's a very long email, and I certainly want to wrap my head around it too. I don't know that everyone's available to come to a commissioners meeting, so that's my thoughts on the matter.
Well, as I said, it seemed as though a lot of the issues were directed toward the Board of Commissioners, and I have not had the time to do a deep dive into this the way I would like to. As well, it was sent at 2:12, and as with the rest of you, I also have other things that go on Monday afternoons, and a lot of what is involved are, well, Angie Purdy's name is mentioned multiple times, and as she is the person that reports directly to the commissioners, I think it's appropriate to have her there. I think it's appropriate to have other members of the RFQ committee there, and they are not present here today. And so I cannot respond for them. I cannot answer for what went on in those meetings. And so I don't think it's appropriate to be holding these kinds of conversations without the folks present who were part of the RFQ committee. So it is now 4:40, and on our agenda, this is time for the public statement. So
Councilor Crossley has her hand up.
So I agree. I'm working in my other job today and trying to prep for this. And seeing that email, it was a lot to read, and I feel like I still haven't gone through it in detail like I did. I did read it from top to bottom, but not in many details, and I feel like I want to read it several different times. I understand that it involves members of the RFQ committee, but because that also went to members of this particular committee, I guess my recommendation or my ask, if I may, would be that if we're going to talk about it, if you feel as though, even though there's 2 commissioners here, and I've heard from you, Commissioner Githens, I don't know if Commissioner Jones would be able to state her feelings and her thoughts if she chooses to. It would be great, but if not, I completely understand. Because I know on the agenda, it says that we will talk about DLZ at the next meeting on April 17th. I guess if we're going to talk about this at the commissioners meeting on Wednesday, can this be a topic of discussion for the next CJRC meeting, and let's push DLZ back a little bit? Because I do feel like and I'm hearing you, I'm listening, and I hear you. I just also think that it would be in the greater good. Sounds like everybody's schedules are not able to allow them to come. But since it does also partly involve the members of this committee too, is there a way that we can have that April 17th? That would just be my ask.
Okay, I will quote something that's in this email. This is from Sheriff Marte, and it says, "That being said, the commissioners now must fully explain in an absolutely transparent manner how they arrived at publicly presenting an incredibly erroneous information as fact." He's asking the commissioners to explain this. And some of the bullet points that he's asking about, he says, full disclosure from the commissioners, full disclosure from the commissioners, if the commissioners. So it's the commissioners who need to respond to this, in my opinion. And so that's why it needs to be at one of our work sessions.
Understand. And I understand that. I guess, again, my ask, if you would be considerate of that ask, is can this, since this will be a topic, and I know that we can watch Cats, as much as I'm a lovely Cats nerd, I always go back and watch them. But for again, the sake of transparency and for the sake of the guiding principles of this, is this something that we can also discuss a little bit in part of the meeting on April 17th?
I'll take that under advisement, and I would like to ask Sheriff Marte when he might be available to meet with the commissioners at a work session.
Okay, thank you.
I'll check my schedule and let you know. I do know for a fact that this Wednesday and Thursday, I'm instructing at a training in the following week as well. So, but everything that I put in writing, I stand behind.
Thank you. Now, can we move to public comment, please? We'll start with Audrey Williams, and please come up and use the microphone, and it's nice to see you again, Ms. Williams. And I'll note for the record that we're starting 3 minutes late, so we'll try to take that into account.
And I apologize, I did not expect to be here in person, so I have some brief notes on my phone, and apparently this is somewhat germane to the topic of conversation. So your last meeting, somebody brought up by public comment that you all had violated the open door law by not talking about the RFQs in public. And so I went through the handbook on Indiana public access laws, and on page 8, there is actually a very specific example that is given exactly in this. And so it should actually be in public, and if you all are not interested in following state law, I'm not entirely sure what we are doing here. As I mentioned in my comment last meeting, if the concern of this committee is what happens to this committee and what happens to this county if we choose to do nothing for the next year, and if you aren't following state law when you are trying to get this process and shove through something that you want done, then what is it that you are trying to do? Because you do not seem interested in this committee. You don't seem interested in public comment. There are many things that people have been saying over and over and over again that you all are not listening to. People have asked for city involvement. People have asked you to listen to members of these committees, and it's just not happening. And I do not know what you all are doing. You're not following state law. You are not doing what the ACLU is asking. You are just plowing ahead with what you want. And I do not know, why do you even bother having these meetings? Because nothing seems to matter. And that's really all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there anyone virtually who wishes to speak, Ms. Mosier?
No, there isn't.
Thank you. Next, Natalia Galvin, are you here? Welcome back to Bloomington, Natalia.
I got this statement approved, so I'm going to be careful. Hello, my name is Natalia Galvin, and I'm a Monroe County resident. I serve as the director of communications for Monroe County Now, and speak on behalf of the chapter today. In the fall of 2021, Monroe County Now hosted our monthly chapter meeting, highlighting criminal justice efforts in our community. We were concerned when we heard from Councilors Wiltz, Crosley, and Scambolari, and Attorney Rice, and have been paying attention to the participation of the CGRC meetings ever since. We reached out to the commissioners with our concern about having city voices at the table. We strongly feel like this effort is an investment of values and resources that will serve us for years to come, likely one of the most important projects of the next decade. We will persist until we see more collaboration and strongly encourage our county council leaders to use their vote and position that we elected them to make strong statements and actions about what they are willing to fund. We also echo and stand in strong solidarity with the statement made at the last meeting by President Reese of the Monroe County Now NAACP. We condemn the lack of transparency and procedural processes. If there is capacity on the part of the sheriff, we call for a brief jail report at the beginning of each CGRC meeting to identify needs of our current jail facility. We echo the NAACP's call for clear implementation of a system of checks and balances, directly asking our county council members to remember that they are a co-equal branch of government. We look to them for leadership on fiscal matters and oversight in our county, although the commissioners have their role. Equally as important is what is the council willing to fund. Finally, we strongly condemn the disrespectful treatment of Councilwoman Crosley, Sheriff Marte, and Prosecutor Wilson in these meetings. Everyone deserves respect and civility. We second the NAACP's recommendation for other committee members to call out and stop disrespectful behavior by colleagues when you see it. Silence is complicity, and there is much power and privilege that comes with your seat at the CGRC table. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Galvin. Next is Debbie Fish. Welcome back.
Good afternoon. Debbie Fish, I'm the chair of the Hope for Prisoners Task Force at Unitarian Universalist Church. And I watched 2 weeks ago from home, and I tried to take notes when there was an overview of the facilities that were visited. And my head was swimming. I had stuff all over. And I think as an educator who trained educators, I needed, and I'm sure some others did, a handout that listed them and listed key points and a place for me to take notes and a way to make sense of it. And I hope that can still be done, because I'm really interested in knowing what you all saw. The other thing I think could be helpful is a matrix, where across the top you put the key things that you're looking for. Along the side, you put the different places maybe that you visited, and then you score each one from 0 to 10. And instead of it being so subjective, it can really be numerically objective of how you come up with what you really want. So I just hope there's some organization behind all of that, so that not only you, but we who are interested can follow along and really know what you've seen, what we all want, and what we can move forward with. Thank you.
Thank you. I will note for the record also that Ms. Mosher has included a lot of the information from last week's meeting into the notes that she's prepared for this record of the meeting. Next up is Kaisa Goodman. Good afternoon.
Good evening, Kaisa Goodman, Public Engagement Director for the City of Bloomington and a resident of Monroe County. I'm glad to be able to provide an update tonight on my remarks from 4 weeks ago. On February 13th, the mayor had once again offered for the city to meet with the county about the jail project in all its facets, including a potential location for a new jail. As of the March 6th meeting, we hadn't yet heard back from the county, but we did receive correspondence from County Attorney Jeff Cockle last week on March 29th. Mr. Cockrell, City Corporation Counsel Beth Kate, City Planning Director Scott Robinson, and I were able to meet today to discuss potential locations. In the interest of transparency, and since that wasn't a public meeting, I'd like to give a very brief summary and update. Overall, I think it was a productive meeting. We discussed the pros and cons of several locations, most promisingly the Thompson property, aka Thompson Area Planned Use Development, which is just south of Catalent and west of South Rogers. Area D of Thompson is a county-owned property of almost 90 acres, about 45 of which is deemed developable, much more land than would be needed for a jail. The property is appropriately zoned, and the city actually approved it for a new jail in 2002. While there are certainly some logistics to be worked out, the city believes this is a promising location due to its proximity to downtown, access to public transit, and ample space for a jail and other services. I look forward to continuing to explore this option with our other partners, including the commissioners, sheriff, and county council, and county staff. As I've said before, this conversation must be about so much more than just building a new jail. As we look at the potential for a new physical jail, it is so fundamental to prioritize public health, mental health care, and wraparound services, to invest in services right now for people in the jail or who could potentially be in our jail. Even as we sit here right now, there are people in jail due to mental health and substance use issues which we as a community have the money to make substantial additional investments in. These investments are crucial, and they are also representative of our community's values. This is demonstrated by everything from the activism we've seen around this issue to the McRobbie's recent donation of $500,000 to IU Health for behavioral health services for young adults. While there is so much work to be done, I am proud to be part of a community that cares so deeply. Now let's further put these values into practice together. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And last is Seth Muchler.
Good afternoon. My name is Seth Muchler. I am a resident of Monroe County. It's a lot to take in hearing about the email from Sheriff Marte. I will hope to absorb all of that, but I do just want to say that I was very disappointed that time was not made for that, and I understand that we are not following Robert's rules, but it does not feel like a very democratic space to me, and I'm very disappointed in that. Going to what I was prepared to sort of talk about today, I'm passing around a copy of the article, The Fox Designing the Hen House, The Cycle of Jail Expansion and Construction in Terre Haute, Indiana, by Jessica Zhang and B. Halbach Singh. I want to give thanks to friends Sam Crow and Lee for helping me find this article. I've only laid it out in print form. It's some really powerful words about some similar issues happening in Vigo County that I hope you all take the time to read. I struggled to try to find any sort of excerpt. It really works as a whole piece, so I would like to, just for my public comment time, read the foreword that I pinned, sort of framing this in our local issue. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. George Santayana. In this case, the past to be remembered isn't even that long ago. Reading about Vigo County's struggle with jail expansion rings eerily similar to the current situation in Monroe County. There are, of course, some differences, but the key themes remain the same. Monroe County has also entered into a settlement with the ACLU. Monroe County also is attempting to build a newer and bigger jail. And you guessed it, Monroe County has hired DLZ to design their new Justice Campus. The good news is we don't have to repeat the past. We don't have to build a bigger jail, and we don't need to let DLZ, a private company with clear and unambiguous bias towards jail expansion, dictate our public policy. We can instead focus our attentions on what we know works: non-coercive mental health and substance use treatment, housing that is actually affordable, food security, and more. These things aren't pipe dreams, they aren't unattainable, they are within our reach. All we must do is stand up and demand a county that cares for its community instead of locking them in cages. There are many ways we can all do our part. It can be as simple as talking to your neighbors or coworkers about these issues. You can send an email to the CJRC and speak your mind. You are also invited to attend Care Not Cages meetings every Thursday at 6 p.m. at the Overlook, 611 West 12th Street, or anything else that feels right to you. Together, we can stop jail expansion in our community. We can learn from Vigo County, and rather than repeat the past, we can build a better future. Thank you. And for anybody in the public, I do have extra copies of this with me today.
Would you have one that I could give to Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Okay, so we're back to discussing visits to other facilities, and I was going to ask you, Councilor Iverson, if you would please talk about what you saw in Franklin County, Ohio, which is Columbus, and it's my understanding that they actually eventually will have 3 buildings altogether. Is that correct?
Yes. TSD, could I be promoted and be allowed to share my screen? Thank you. All right. So for those of you who've been on the CJRC before, you will have seen this presentation soon after we made this tour on November the 18th of 2022. Given that's the case, I'm going to go through this very quickly to get to the recommendations at the end. You can see here that we are here with our former jail commander, as well as representatives of DLZ and the Franklin County Correctional Facility, looking at the Sally Port. Of note, the high ceiling and the wide berth offering multiple lanes of traffic were attractive here. Here's the handoff situation. Again, the thing that really stood out for us here was that the natural light and open concept. This is where the arresting officer would bring in the inmate, or the person arrested, excuse me, and hand them off to correctional staff. At the time that we toured, this was not an operational facility, so there's no inmates going to be in this picture. Here's the booking area. Again, very open concept, lots of lighting. Here's an intake area. Again, open concept, lots of lighting. This is one of the cell blocks. The cell blocks were divided into different groups. I've labeled this slide as orientation. This would be a low security type of situation. Again, notice the space, the natural lighting, etc. Here's another cell block. This is the detox center. This is the area in which individuals who needed these services would come here. Obviously, you can see here that this is a concept that was, it hasn't been tried yet, of course. There were no inmates here, but there are very little walls here. This is a very open concept. This is very interesting to our maintenance staff. Here you see the maintenance corridor is set behind all of the walls of the correctional facility that allows maintenance staff to do maintenance, contractors to come in without having to interact with the inmates. This is of particular interest to me in that DLZ, the firm that the commissioners have signed on with, is familiar with building facilities that are LEED certified. My understanding of this facility is that they just missed LEED Gold by a very slim margin. And so it's possible to have intersectionality between the climate crisis response as well as justice. This would be the sheriff's office. So Sheriff Marte is a nice, roomy space for you to conduct your meetings. Here's something that we get to kind of the items that we liked. The organizational structure is that such that the county commissioners created a separate office of justice policy and programs, where their sole task was to look at evidence-based programs as they came out of academia or practice, and those policies were then identified as a good fit for this community. They also had a board akin to the CJRC, and then their core team to build or to design the new center was made up of a captain, research and development major, and 4 deputies. So 1 deputy that was specialized in research, 1 in inmate wellness, one in facilities, and lastly, an outsider, which is someone that kind of gave that perspective. Here's what we liked. I'm going to read these out loud. I know the type is small, but I'll go very quickly. Number one, they had a focus on inmate health. We've seen that with how Sheriff Marte has been running his jail here in Monroe County, and we think that that was very key to the way that they're doing things there in Ohio. Secondly, they provided employee perks countywide, such as a wellness gym and a cafeteria. Thirdly, there were plentiful restroom facilities, not only for inmates, but also for staff. We've heard that as something that our jail lacks currently. Biophilic design, which was a lot of artwork, a lot of nature, those sorts of things, was heavily focused there. In addition, there was the LEED certification that I talked about. There was a rapid resource center. This was an atrium at the end of the building that, as inmates were allowed to exit the building, they would go into this atrium, and there would be social service agencies that would have offices there so that you could arrange whatever needs you had without leaving the facility. So if you needed to arrange for a vehicle, a ride into town, you needed to arrange for healthcare, you needed to arrange for your next meeting with Centerstone, or what have you, all those agencies were right there to take care of business before you, after you were discharged, but before you actually left the building. They had some nice furniture by a company called Norix. The Chase was accessible. There were locker rooms for the staff. There was a wide sally port. The tray pass location was in the doors. Let me go back to a picture. You can see in I wish I had a pointer, in the doors labeled K, J, I, and with the numbers there, the letters there, excuse me, the tray pass is built into the door so that the officers felt that provided them a little more safety as they were passing the trays. Let's see. The tethered location, shackle locations also were built with officer safety in mind. The drains were located outside of doors. I know we've had a lot of drainage issues here, and so they thought about that as they were designing their jail. There were clocks everywhere. They were all hardwired. I know we've talked about that for our jail. There was just clocks everywhere. The booking process was made to put the inmates first, and the booking was furthermore elevated. We've seen that at multiple facilities. There was pre-trial desk space at booking so that they were able to expedite that process. I know that's been something that we're very interested in terms of diversion. Number 19 was intake showers and process. There was a 72-hour holding for orientation. All of the staff were being trained in trauma-informed practices. There was property storage for inmates being booked in, and then there was also food and supply staging areas. So those were the 23 things that we liked in this facility. Any questions? Ms. Wilson.
Yes. County Council Member Iverson, if I remember correctly, did you do the original presentation on November 21st of 22? That's what I have in my notes, just for the public if they wanted to go back and be able to look at the full presentation, because I remember it being very lengthy and detailed. I know you did a lot of work on it.
And we also had Monroe County staff that filled in the blanks. So I am by no means a content expert, and they certainly were able to kind of fill in what I had missed.
Okay, so so it's back in November. It's November 21st, 2022 is what I have. And if I remember from that conversation, the reason the facility missed LEED Gold certification was because of transportation, right? They didn't build, that was what kept it from that status.
I'm uncertain. We'd have to talk to individuals about that. I don't quite remember the reason why they missed certification. Do you want a quick answer, or do you want me to get back to you on that?
Oh, it's okay. I'll go back and look on that November. I'm pretty sure that was correct, because I think the buses didn't go out there and it hadn't opened yet.
Yeah, and it was close. And again, this facility is located on the edge of town. It's in an industrial area, and there was no public transportation at the time that we visited.
Thank you.
I believe it was being planned.
And how big was this jail again? That I can't remember.
I don't have that answer for you. Again, if I were more of a content expert in this area, I would have that. There are people that can get these answers to us very quickly.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah. Yes, Councilmember Crossley.
So I had a couple of questions. One, I know we had talked about that facility is not open. Is it still not open?
I believe there was a groundbreaking. I don't know if inmates are in there. Are inmates in there right now? Inmates are in there right now.
Okay. And my other question is, because I remember going to the Hamilton County facility last fall, and I was actually kind of surprised to see them there, and I'm also, like, in retrospect, listening to this presentation again. I don't know if you would know this, but is there a reason why DLZ keeps showing up to these tours? I'm curious because I'm curious.
That is a fantastic question. There are 3 companies that, from what I know, build jails in Indiana. So the Hamilton County Jail and this Franklin County Jail were both DLZ builds. So you see an overrepresentation of DLZ in these presentations because that's where we've brought pictures back from, or that's where large groups have gone. In terms of Hamilton County, Indiana, there's a large group because it's so close. Certainly the other facilities that were visited, particularly maybe out of state, were other companies that were built, but that's why you see an overrepresentation of DLZ. Yeah.
Councilor Iverson, is this jail set up for direct supervision in all of the units, or was it just in the medical?
So you can see here that in a cell block where our former commander Crow has his arm resting, there would be a correctional officer there posted at all times. So that individual would be inside the cell block, and they would be in charge of maintaining, order and, whatever type of schedule of the day inside that cell block at all times. They don't leave the cell block. Directly behind, so I took that picture, directly behind me is a secure location where they're able to use the restrooms and take a break, but this is a very intentional design that provides that kind of direct care.
And also, what was the recreation area set up as? Do you remember?
Yes, the recreation, let's see if I got a good picture. The recreation is behind that glass wall that this crowd is moving toward. So each cell block had its own recreational area. It was not outside, it was inside. And there was you can see it's a tall panel of windows, and there were, depending on the security level of each cell block, there was different recreational equipment. So for general population or low security, there were, weights, and they were even talking about putting in basketball hoops and things like that, but there was conversation about maybe that wouldn't be a good idea or a good idea. But that was the recreational area. It is in the secure cell block, and inmates can access it 24/7. Well, whenever they're not in their cell.
Thank you.
Ms. Wilson.
And actually, I have a question for Commissioner Githens. You used the word direct supervision. Can you tell me what, when we're using that word, what are we referring to?
That someone, as Councilor Iverson discussed, there's somebody who is jail staff is in that unit at 24/7.
Okay.
And actually directly interacts with the people who are there. And for the low security and the groups that, or at least this is the way they were operating in Arizona, that they get to know one another and there's the kind of treatment that I feel like is coming out of Sheriff Marte's group, that they're responsive as people to one another.
Okay.
And then if you'll recall, when we all went to Hamilton County, there was not this system, they had the system where they were elevated up in a central pod. I know I'm not using correct terminology, so I apologize. That overlooked the different pie wedges that were the different cells. So you can see the different kind of thought process of how to build a jail here, right? So, yeah.
Oh, I appreciate it. I just want to make sure that I'm not assuming what a word means and we're all talking about the same thing. So thank you, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Judge Stafford.
As I look at this, I'm seeing direct supervision versus, I guess, what I'll call a crow's nest approach of somebody looking down into the different pie wedges or pods. In this system, is there additional security above and behind, like looking down in the crow's nest, or is it this instead of that?
The way that I understand it is that it's this instead of that. Now, if you are the correctional officer working at that desk, and your job is to maintain order and control or whatever their task is for this entire cell block, certainly they have backup and they have individuals to come should they need it. Sheriff Marte, do you have any other comments?
I'm a little biased because when I was training Rikers Island, that was the concept. You always had a person in there, so you get the feel here and the vibe of the people in there you're with. If you're on top of a pod and looking down, you might miss that, you know. But it doesn't hurt to have both. Because I can remember being in an environment like that and just sense that something's about to go away, you know. So you far removed, you might not get that.
And there were amenities put in here, into the cell block, to try and, you know, make this as much as home as possible. So it really shocked me. So there's like showers and there's hot water stations for tea, and there's some really interesting concepts. Now, none of this had been tested at the time that I was in there. So it could very well be that at this point they've ripped all that out because it wasn't working, or maybe they doubled down on it. But yeah, it's interesting to hear your perspective.
This sounds a lot like what we saw in Arizona, and it was working and had been for a couple of years. And so there are places that have data. And the Arizona facilities, none of them were built or designed by DLZ, put it that way too.
Councilmember Wiltz, you had some data that you just looked up in answer to Ms. Wilson's question. Do you have that handy?
Yes, I was just looking online, and there are 864 beds in the initial construction, with a second phase that says it will open next year, which is now this year, with an additional 426 beds.
What was the first number?
864.
864, an additional 400?
Additional 426.
Was the additional one for females? Because I thought when I heard DLZ talk up in either Franklin or Vigo County that they were saying that the second facility would be for females.
Could be. I'm looking at a press release from Franklin County. So I don't
We
know.
can find that out. Judge Stafford.
I wondered if you might know how many would be in a pod or unit like this with direct supervision.
So it varied by security level.
Okay.
And I'm gonna look to the expert at the table because I could make an educated guess based on this picture, but the lower security, the more people you had in a cell block, the higher security, the fewer.
That makes sense. Yeah, it does. But it just depends on the number of beds that we want that fits Bloomington, Indiana. I mean, this is great, but we don't need something that big, you know. However, I don't know if the other additional bed is for a medical ward or psychological. I mean, I don't know. It could be something like that, like to provide medical assistance right away, which we do want here.
Yeah. Judge Stafford.
I wondered if the sheriff has a position on how many beds he would recommend for the new facility, as I don't believe that we have had yet a number given to us.
You know, as a group, I like to defer to the group as well, but with the stipulation that if we need to expand, we have a location where we can expand, because right now, where we're at now, we can't. We just can't do it. But thinking forward thinking is not to repeat the mistake we made before in the past. I'm not locked in on a number. What the committee decides, I'm happy to start at that point. But let's keep in mind that we might have to expand one day in the future. We just don't know. Bloomington is growing dramatically right now. We got an interstate now, and it's connecting, Indianapolis to almost Evansville now, and far north. So we have to think forward be prepared for that. Although, the positive thinking is this, that we want to be able to provide services outside and inside to prevent from people to going in the first place. But we do have people that, quite frankly, are very dangerous to society, and we have to think about that as well.
Yes, Judge Stafford.
Sorry, I have a follow-up question to the commissioners. Have the commissioners made a decision about the number of beds for the initial jail?
No. We do have the county council's
Can I talk to you about what the
recommendation.
county council thought?
I would be thrilled.
Yes. In the policy brief that we approved at our last county council meeting, we made a recommendation. So we don't have the statutory authority to adopt, but we made a recommendation of no more than 400 beds. And that wasn't a number that we pulled out of my head as I was trying to sleep at night. It was a number that came out of the Ken Ray study, the survey that the judges did, the survey that our legal teams did, and we came to that number. That's pretty close to the averages that were on those studies. And if you look at that policy brief, we cited all of them with their page numbers.
Appreciate it, and I did read and review that policy brief. It was very helpful. I also noted on that policy brief a request to have the jail located as close to services downtown as possible, which certainly I personally agree with, although, again, I don't speak for the Board of Judges on that position. Sheriff Marte, do you have any reaction to the council's recommendation for 400 beds?
To start with, 400 is not bad. I don't want people in the community to think that we're going to try to fill 400 people in there. You know, that worries a lot of people. And I always say that, you know, our goal is to keep people from not coming back into the jail. But to be in compliance at times, if God forbid we do have to have a larger bed size, 400 is not bad to start with. Doesn't mean we have to fill it. We just have it in case we need it.
Does the county council have a position on how many of those beds, let me back up, is that number inclusive of padded cells or not inclusive of padded cells?
That was not included in our recommendation.
Okay.
And I'm going to speak for myself and not for my county council colleagues. I am anxiously awaiting House Bill 1006 and Senate Bill 1 to get through in the Indiana Assembly. That's going to have, I think, a lot of bearing on what we end up building.
And to be fair, I'm gonna ask my Joe Commander to come up here because he's back there constantly, so he's going to see things from a better angle than I am, a better view as well.
And while Commander Gibbons is on his way up, would you explain to everyone what 1006, House Bill 1006 is?
Yes, House Bill 1006 is a bill that Representative Steuerwald and some other folks have been working really hard on that further clarifies the way that we deal with mental and behavioral health for those who are incarcerated in Indiana. Part of what the bill lays out is that regional facilities will be constructed in the state to as a place where those who have mental or behavioral health can go. Right now, the bill has not passed. So the way that the bill is structured right now, and of course, this is my reading, and I am not in the Indiana Assembly, so take this with a grain of salt, but that an arresting agency can take an individual who is suffering from an acute mental or behavioral health episode, drop them off at this facility for a holding period. Right now, there's debate about 48 versus 72 hours. Then the local Board of Judges will weigh in on what is the best case for that individual, whether they need to stay in that facility or move to another facility. And so this is kind of a way that we're thinking about, or that the Indiana Assembly is thinking about how to reduce the number of individuals with behavioral or mental health issues in a jail. Again, I'm going to look to the experts. Is that your understanding? Did I get it close on that bill?
Yes.
All right.
And I apologize, I have not read all the details of it, so sounds like I need to get that done. Can you share with me, if you know, how that is different than the current local hospital's 6th floor and the involuntary commitment procedures? I asked just to better understand what that'll look like if it gets passed and those facilities are built, because I can share with you one of the many challenges that we're having right now specific to mental health is that when someone goes through a competency process, which in criminal law is an evaluation of whether or not they can assist in their defense or understand all the participants, they will wait for very lengthy periods of time in our jail until they're able to be transported to a hospital for long-term care. So I was wondering if that bill was in any way getting at those kind of long-term care support, because it's very difficult, I know, for the jail as well, who's trying to treat people as humanely as possible and support them, and it's difficult to watch someone with severe mental health issues not being able to get them treatment. I was wondering if that bill got to that.
Well, it's a debate that's happening right now within the confines of that bill is to say, if you have a holding period, and we're really getting in the weeds here, so if you have a holding period that goes over into the weekend, then you've got someone that is in a situation where they do not have, their civil rights might be violated because they don't have a way to get to a judge, or they don't have a way to get to an attorney, or something, those lines, to say, I don't belong here, I want to leave, or what have you. And so there's a current debate going on with the bill's authors and other groups to try and find the right balance of how do you make sure that individuals that need help are receiving help, individuals that are really sick are getting the help that they need, and weighing out, their civil rights. So, I'm not an attorney, so I am simply parroting what I heard during committees on this vote. So
I really appreciate it, actually. And I have to admit, Judge Crothy and Judge Stafford are better experts on the involuntary commitment process. I just wanted to share a little bit that there is a difference, and we're hoping to get as much support as we can to start helping people. So if I can defer to them, if that would be okay, and they can explain.
Well, I don't know all the details of the new bill, and what it's going to come out to, but right now, if someone is involuntarily committed, there's a duty judge who signs. That's why sometimes I have to leave these meetings in the middle, because so they can't be involuntarily committed without a judge's order. Well, actually, they can for 72 hours, but then we have to have a commitment hearing. We're kind of changing our procedures. So we're not sure how it's going to play out either, because I think it's going to involve a lot more involuntary commitments than what we have now. And obviously, people have civil rights and we have to have a commitment hearing within 3 days. So I don't think that'll change, but
yeah,
we right now they do have the right to a hearing within 3 days of them filing that petition after the emergency detention order. This gets complicated by being regional also. So we would take care of presumably the people who reside or were arrested or picked up wherever in Monroe County, but then we also have to worry about if they were picked up in Morgan County versus Owen County so the other jurisdictions are going to come into play too.
Yeah, we have a hospital, so we have more,
Right.
We have some out-of-county people that come here.
Right. It's a very complicated sort of situation with funding and everything else that we're looking at.
Councilmember Wiltz, did you want to say anything? All right, so
Sorry.
we have our jail commander at the table. Do you want me to pull the slides down, or do you want me to keep them up?
In terms of, what are you trying to do, for our presentation or to
No,
elaborate?
because we were talking, before we got on to this side conversation of 1006, we
Number
were
of
talking
beds.
about these types of issues.
One of the things that I wanted your opinion on is they're asking about a beds of 400.
Well, without having a full conversation with the entire committee and us kind of coming to an agreement, I will say that per our agreement with Mr. Falk is that we will build a facility larger than the one we have now. So currently our beds is 294 beds. And we are at near, when we get to 244, we are near violating our agreement. So depending on what kind of services we want to provide, depending on what kind of facility we want to have, whether it is erring on the side of mental health and things like we're interested in, those are things to take into consideration when we're talking about a complete facility in terms of beds. Because currently we have one padded cell. So if somebody's here now, that has self-injurious behavior, and we are trying to help them by getting them in a safe area and then provide mental health services in the interim. We have one.
And you covered some of that on Saturday when you presented some of the photos on the cleanup that you've done to the county council member at large session at the library.
And we plan to show that as well here. Yeah.
For me, the question also is how many additional padded cells and medical cells would you be recommending?
Well, again, and that obviously has to be a conversation with everybody. But I would say, depending on the type of facility you want to have, that's what we're going to gear towards when talking about total beds. Like, for instance, I would say just in law enforcement, in my past 17 years, we are nearing more of a mental health issue than we are a criminal issue. So we want to gear our facility, I would assume, in meeting that obligation to the community. So with only one, it's not working. It would have to be 4 to 6 to possibly 8, depending on what we're trying to do, what kind of services we have available.
And if you look at the screen here, you'll see that there are a number of those lettered cells that are for individuals who need that padded environment. So you see there's quite a number of those there in the intake area.
I would also say this. Not everybody requires a padded cell. Some people just require an isolation cell to where we can watch them and they can communicate directly with us without the jail population coming down on them and affecting them negatively. So sometimes it's not just a padded cell. Sometimes it's giving somebody an opportunity to separate from the jail environment and get an opportunity to really speak to mental health and the safety of their own cell.
Can I?
Commissioner Cross.
Yeah.
Councilmember Crossley.
Don't want to be upgraded right now. So I guess my question would be, in reading some of our local news and hearing the bookings for our facility, understanding that the facility, I was under the impression it was 287, that we're, on average, we're anywhere between 160 to 170, but I think in recent weeks we've been up to 190, is that correct?
Yeah, we've come back down, but yes.
Okay. And then you just also mentioned, and I've heard Sheriff Marte also mention that our facility, like, is being it almost feels like you're having to treat mental health. And I'm of the understanding that that's not what y'all want to do, correct?
Treat mental health, is that what you're saying?
Like, yes and no. Like, right now, 80% of facilities are seeing people come in that are of substance use and mental health. And that's what we're seeing our current jail be used. Am I correct in that assumption?
That's
That's
jail
everywhere.
in Indiana right now,
Right,
yes.
right. Okay.
You're right on, yes.
Gotcha. Okay. And I guess where I'm getting to with that is, since we talked about what the council did last week, and we're having this conversation of how many beds, do we do 400, do we do this, do we do that? I know when we had talked about in our county council meeting, I also was a part of the discussion that I said it makes me a little uneasy, even though I know it says no more than 400. I was just kind of looking up where House Bill 1006 is right now, and it's in committee right now. And it mental health programs specifies the circumstances under which a person may be involuntarily committed to a facility for mental health services, and specifies that these services are medically necessary. Establishes a local mental health referral program to provide mental health treatment for certain persons who have been arrested. So I guess right there, establishes a local mental health referral program. For me, I feel like I've said this before, and I'll say it again because it's been a while since I've said it. Like, 400 to me, that's just me, little me, makes me a little uneasy because I really want us to really focus, even though I know that's what the state, and we're trying to get our state reps to do, is to focus primarily on mental health. Because if we have 160 to 170 or 190, whatever the case is, it seems to be that we have a low population. I understand we see that Bloomington and Monroe is growing, But I also want to refute the fact that just because the population is growing, and I'm not saying that you said that by no means, that, you know, that's because it almost feels like we're also just assuming that those are folks that'll just be in our facility. Again, I'm not saying that that's what you're saying by any means, but again, my preference would love to be that we also just, because in talking to constituents and listening to this, folks really want to make sure that mental health treatment, because of the criminalization of that field, is somewhat out of a facility. So I don't know if there is a way, I'm sure we're light years ahead, but I guess I would like to see conversations in the future with this committee get moved towards the fact that we don't have to have that mental health component inside a facility, because we're treating our humans here in the county and beyond in a spot that's outside of a jail facility.
And that's a very good point. And that's one of the reasons why I really believe there should be more people at the table to give their opinions, because our lens, we're telling you what we see and what we experience in our world. So we have to depend on the committee to guide us. Where do you want to go? And we'll help try to get you there. So as far as beds, no, I don't take offense to that at all. That's why I like to have more people at the table that know exactly what the community is saying, what the community wants. We're here to serve the community. So
We, as a facility, work very close with the courts, and they work diligently in making sure that people that require those services are released to those services. So people that we can't help because of our current build, they ensure they get help. They get released from us on their own recognizance, and they get moved to those services. Part of the issue is, when we're talking about jail build, you're completely validating what you're saying. You're 100% right. Some of the issue with criminal behavior, as of this time, is associated a lot with mental health. And if they can get help before they get to jail, perfect. But if they come to jail, we want to ensure that they have that opportunity to grow and then become viable citizens when they come back out.
Yeah, Judge Deppard.
If I can agree with you, Commander Gibbons, and say I think what I would recommend personally is something like a both-and approach. We need to provide mental health services prior to incarceration as part of Intercept Zero, and we are, I think, always going to need them inside the jail, because there are people who are too dangerous to release into the general population who need and deserve mental health services while they're incarcerated in our jail. And so I would encourage us to look at a both-and perspective on that. I would also say, in terms of the number of beds, I completely understand and respect your hesitation to commit to a larger number. I also would like to see us consider an approach similar to what Hamilton County had, where they built the concrete block for it, but they didn't put the cells in it yet, and they had, I think, an antique bridge in that part of it. That gives us, you know, an approach where it's easier for us in 10 years to add more if we need it. It's there, it's shelled out, in other words, without us having an easy way to fill it up very quickly. So I think it incentivizes us to be frugal with the number of people we put in the jail, which is, I think, frugal is the wrong word, but it urges us to be sensitive to the number of people being put in jail, while being realistic that the historic numbers that the study that the county paid for are all recommending numbers in the 450 range.
Yeah.
So that's just my thought.
Judge Crothan.
I just wanted to add one thing about the mental health, is that already our hospital, my understanding is when they built the new hospital, they built the mental health wing smaller. So we're already, I get calls in the middle of the night all the time because we have to transport people to other counties. So we already don't have enough room for involuntary commitments. So when and if the bill passes and we're doing more involuntary, it's going to be more resources needed from the county.
And I think your insight is going to be absolutely vital at that point. If that bill passes and if it's funded, I think, you know, your experience is going to be very important. Yes, Commander.
Some of the issues we face with mental health in general is sometimes a person coming to jail is their first opportunity to even partake in any kind of process or any kind of help. So to piggyback off what she just said, you need a both and. That is usually their first interaction with any kind of mental health facility.
Yes, Ms. Wilson.
Yes, I appreciate that, and I do think that's true. And keeping in mind, if we're taking a rehabilitative approach and trying to understand what has led someone to have that case in front of us, to try to connect them to services, that sometimes is the first time that they've had someone who's going to look at their case and try to figure out what to do to get them the help that they need so they don't come back. I do, though, as we talk about mental health and substance abuse treatment, I do hope that as we get down to kind of planning, that we support the both and approach, and that if someone can, when a judge makes a bail decision about whether or not someone should stay in, it's focusing on whether or not they're a flight risk and whether or not they're a danger to themselves or the community. If they can be released from the jail, if we can support and build up the services in the community, because sometimes the waiting lists are so long, if we can support outside the jail, it also feels in a really important place that we should focus. I'm hesitant when we talk about mental health and substance to put too many treatments in a jail, because it's still a jail. And if we can release them back into their community to go back to their jobs and back to their families, I want to make sure that we're narrowly tailoring our treatment for the people who meet those two prongs, and also building up the community so they can make those connections again and spend less time in jail. So I hope that we include that in our rubric as we move forward.
Sure. Judge Stafford.
I wonder if we have done anything in terms of offering an RFQ for starting any of the recommended services in the Eve Hill report to our current jail.
To the best of my understanding, we haven't.
No, but we have been in touch with Representative Matt Pierce on what kinds of things we might be wanting to look at here in conjunction with House Bill 1006.
Well, I think we have the current ability to start doing exit planning with our inmates. I think we have the current ability for our health department to issue an RFQ, at least in some way, to start tracking our inmates as they leave, to the extent that we're constitutionally able to, and to the extent it's appropriate to do so. I think we have no reason that we cannot right now start offering some of those services. And so I would like to see us issue it, and at least something immediately, to start services in our jail.
Yeah, there was a lot of really good recommendations in there. All right.
And I'm so sorry, I need to add just 20 seconds.
Yeah, please.
I did have lunch with Lori Kelly recently, the department head of the health department. She and I discussed the Eve Hill report at length. Obviously, she and I both understand we are not in charge of this committee, nor do we have any authority to get anything started, but she and I had a very productive conversation, I thought, about the Eve Hill report, and I would like to see her back on this committee so that she can offer those recommendations to us here in person. Again, just from me, not from the Board of Judges. Thank you.
Wonderful. It appears to me that my slides and me am on the screen far too much, and we should pivot to a much more interesting presentation. But I want to throw one more data point out at you. The building you see on the screen right now sits on 23 acres. So that building, that footprint of 23 acres, contains all phases of the build, which, as Councilmember Wiltz just mentioned, is going to have many more beds than we will need. Yes, Judge
Do
Carl.
they have the courts in there too, or no?
I believe there are court rooms, but no, but the courts aren't there.
So they transport them?
That's right. So the conversation we had while we were there was that they had a secure bus, and their courthouse is downtown, and they would bus inmates all the way downtown or back if they needed that service, or if they needed something that could be taken care of in the jail, then they would do that.
We had talked at a very earlier meeting, I think in October, asking if we could get an estimate on the number of inmates who would need to be transported and what that cost might be, so we could do a cost comparison of the transportation. I don't believe that we've ever received that estimate of how many inmates would need to be transported for court and what that might look like, because my understanding is that some inmates cannot be transported with other inmates and et cetera.
Certainly, we would have to look to our sheriff and his staff to ascertain that data.
I'd like to point out it's 5:41. Oh, sorry.
One more question. Sorry.
I just wanted clarification on when you say 23 acres, I think you said, is that parking lot, grounds, the entire thing,
My understanding is that is the campus size. So that includes
everything.
parking lot, and on the other side of this building, there's a parking garage for the correctional staff.
Okay, so it's a big campus.
This
and
is
okay.
this is easily 2 times bigger.
I think it's 3 times what we're looking at.
Yeah, this is much bigger than what we want. And so that's why if you look at the recommendations, we're making recommendations about program areas or designs that we liked. I don't think that, we're going to be funding something of this size.
Oh, right. I just was doing the math with
Yeah.
the square footage that you gave on some things, and it's way less. So I just trying to get it figured out. Thanks.
Sheriff Marte, would you take the mic from me, please?
If we could have our PowerPoint uploaded. While they're doing that, I'm going to give the floor over to the jail commander. We're just going to show you some of the upgrades that we just completed. One of the ones that we really wanted up as soon as possible, once we took over, actually was a J block, and we accomplished that. Now let the jail commander proceed from here.
Well, we just gave this, as you said earlier, this presentation on Saturday to the committee. So that was an hour long. We're going to try to get this in 10 minutes. So if we can go ahead to the next slide.
It wasn't to this committee.
Can
It
I
was
clarify that it was to the at-large county council members who held a listening session at the library?
Yes.
That was a lot.
Next slide. There you go. This is the intake before. You can see that the ground is very porous. These are some of the things that we had issue with in terms of being able to manage that surface, specifically because this is the first surface that is within the secure part of the facility. So this is just outside of the Sally Port. Whoever comes in this room, inmate, guard, that travels through the rest of the facility. So when we talk about MRSA staff, these type of issues, this is the kind of thing that gets tracked throughout the entire facility as a whole. We can go to next. This is afterwards. This was a 3-step process. First, we have to grind down through the grime, specifically through the edges themselves.
asking if you could speak into the microphone.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Sorry, I have to hear myself talk all day, so it gets kind of loud. So when we get into the interior now, it's completely resurfaced. The paint on the ground is secures and seals the ground and allows us to maintain and clean that surface multiple times a day. And then same with the walls. The last picture provided a photo of the pad that was on the wall.
Yes, if you could go back so they could see it, please. Can you go back 1 slide?
That pad had been saturated with at least 10 years of oils and sweat and whatever else has been in there. That was not something that we could keep clean. We could not keep that floor clean, regardless of how many times we tried to clean that surface.
It's crucial that he mentions that because everyone that comes into the facility comes to that point of entry. And we had to make sure that we were able to actually clean that floor and sanitize it every single day. And the state of it was before, we just couldn't do that. So now we can. So you go to the next slide, please.
We can go to the next slide. Next, there you go. That's the side-by-side comparison. You can see that it's quite literally night and day. One thing that Sheriff Marte did as soon as he took office was increase visibility throughout the facility. It's heavily lit area now, for that intake area, as well as every block, every cell, every hallway, and any time that you have access to light, specifically sunlight, that promotes a different behavior with inmates and with staff. And that also allows us better visibility to see everything. Next slide. This is before Sally Port. Next. There's the hump that the commissioners had removed to help us with some clearance issues. This is the Sally Port sealed. Again, this is cleaned multiple times a day, power washed, it's wiped down, so that nothing comes from outside to inside the secure facility portion.
When the jail commander mentioned that, if you could go back one slide, please. It's probably hard to see, but when the commissioners approved the whiting of the Sally Port, you could see a line to the right. That's how much we had to shorten, whiten up that Sally Port, because it was very difficult to get an actual transport van in there and maneuver and not hit that wall on the left side. Those two doors holds our x-ray machine. So God forbid someone is trying to come out and the van is trying to leave, potentially before in the past, someone could have been pinned or hurt there. Next slide.
Next slide. We're trying to go quick here. This is J Block before. These photos were from the presentation in January. This block is now the mental health dorm. Our mental health staff chose the hues and the colors, which included accent walls in an attempt to kind of meet people at a different level, to separate them from the standard jail environment. Next slide. Go ahead.
Sorry, when you say mental health staff, do you mean the licensed clinical social workers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and they also chose the inmates that needed that environment as well.
And what was the number of inmates in that cell block, do you know?
We have 16 right now.
Okay.
It actually fluctuates between 16 and 23. This is again J Block before. That cell, again, this J Block was just a general population block when the sheriff took office. But that condition of that cell was 98, 99% of the entire facility. That cell looked like that. And that's because inmates were locked down 23 hours a day. They did not have access to things that they have access to now. Next slide. You can see how poorly lit the area is. Again, I'll hit on that because that is one of the main things that the inmate population speak to now, and how much better they feel on a daily basis, and how much cleaner things have been. Even though we haven't got the entire facility done yet, we're still working our way through. Even the cell blocks that we have not got to yet, we still clean thoroughly, which it looks completely different. Next slide.
One of the things that, if you go back one slide, please. One of the things the jail commander did right away, and needed to be done, when we actually showed you the PowerPoint, the first one, and we showed you some graffiti, racial graffitis, we had to get in there and remove that right away. So we actually bought some brushes and rollers and painted over those things right away, because it was really a climate to cause some problems for us, for the residents in there when they see racist things on the walls like that. So I'm glad that when we went back in there that he took care of that right away first before we moved on to anything else.
We actually got in, again, talking about that January PowerPoint, of those slurs. We took photos and we started that day covering things. It's not something that we wanted to take a photo of, wait a week, present it to everybody. That's not something that Sheriff Marte is about. He's very much about moving forward, to my detriment, because he overloads me with work, but that's neither here nor there. Next slide. This is what it looks like now. You can see that it's vastly different than most cell blocks. You'll see later on in D block, we go with a blue color that's meant for, it's statistically proven as a calming color, and a white color. This color has this block has 4 different colors that we utilize, all picked out by the mental health staff. So again, you can see running along the cells how well lit they are. You can see that the television, it's a larger television. It was moved up the wall so that the top tier and the bottom tier can see that. What's not in this photo is the clocks that we put in each block that's also up near that television so that both tiers can see them. There's only one cell in each block, and it's the one on the bottom tier next to the bathroom that can't see that clock. That's just how the facility is built. Again, staff walks through every hour. If somebody asks what time it is, they tell them. But having that available at any time has been greatly beneficial to the people inside because they have meetings with their inmate or their attorneys, their families. They have to know what time they need to be out. And now that they're out, more time during the day, they have access to be able to plan those things a little bit better. Next slide. Again, some more photos here. These are after photos. There'll be some side-by-side photos so that you guys can see directly what the comparison is. Next slide. Again, after photos of the entire block. The two photos on the right are in cells. Next slide. Side-by-side comparison. You can see that in a perfect world, we would completely grind down through the concrete, flatten it all out, epoxy it, get it cleared and sanitized. That is not what we did here. All we tried to do was just get down through the grime, seal it, and allow us to actually have a surface that we can keep clean. It doesn't look perfect, but that's not what we were after. Next slide. Side-by-side comparison here. You can see the cell on the right has graffiti and things of that nature on the wall. What you can't see in that photo on the right, and you can barely see it, is the ground underneath that red brick is black. That is not just poorly lit because you can see the flash from the camera. You can see how well lit it is. That's how black the floor was inside the cells. Next slide. Side-by-side comparison, same cell. You can see the difference. Again, look at the photo on the left. When the sheriff asked why it was so poorly lit, the response was for officer safety somewhat, so that it was easier to look inside of cells without your reflection showing through the cell. My response to that was, we're not worried about trying to look through a window. We're going to be in the blocks. So we took care of that. More hands-on, more face-to-face interaction, more human, some kind of connection that we could develop, and we have. Next slide. This is D block. This is a general population block. This is prior to the television and the clock going up. There's no inmates in this block at the time, nor was there inmates in J block when we took those photos. But you can see, there are no before pictures here, but you can see the general scheme we're looking at for the rest of the facility. Everything's going to be white and blue. We save money by going to two colors and buying in bulk. Obviously, we can lower the cost and be more cost efficient. But again, conditioned the floor, sealed it. Any porous surface either got sealer or paint. Next slide. You can see on the left the photo there where the concrete's chipping away right by the railing. Obviously, in a perfect world, we'd fill those, sand it or grind it down, make it flat. That is not something we were concerned with. The foundation is not compromised at all. That's superficial. It's aesthetic. What we were trying to do is get sealer in there. Now that it's been grinded down and cleaned and then sealed, we can run a broom through there and a mop through there and be just fine and maintain that area. The picture on the right is just another view from atop the staircase. That is a crow's nest view, per se, of what the entire block looks like. Next photo. The photo on the left is the showers. You can see how much more clean it is. But the showers themselves, getting back to that January presentation, ASI came in and sealed the floor in the shower themselves so that the water's not sitting underneath that surface anymore or leaking down into the judge's chambers. I'm sure they are appreciative of that. The picture on the right, clean, again, kind of the same premise we're going for the entire facility. Next photo. Some after photos, again, same thing we're looking at. It's making sure everything is sealed, cleaned, so that we can maintain, which is much easier to do once we get to this position. Next slide. These are the photos. Again, these are from the January presentation. The ceilings themselves, we ran into an issue We were looking to get them replaced. However, in the meantime, we were going to try to take it apart and clean it ourselves. The issue we ran into is everything you see there with the grate there, the filter, is all welded together. So all those weld spots that you see on the edges, that entire ceiling area is one piece. So that is not something that we can properly maintain. So what we've done in the meantime is clean that area multiple times a day. The reason that it looks like that is because of the fan in that area. Hot water provides humidity, which sits at the top of that. And that is just a build issue, I would say. And that's something that we've just had to navigate to ensure that it remains as clean as possible. Next slide. Do you want to hit on that?
If you go back to the previous slide, please. One of the issues also is the age of the building. The vent ducts have not been properly cleaned in a long time. So our concern is that we have residents and workers that are breathing that air because the vents haven't been cleaned for some time now. So we're struggling with this here. So it's one of the things that concerns us. Next slide.
May I ask, I know that 2 of the vent fans were to be replaced. Is that one of the replacement fans impacting this? Do you know?
I don't think so, because what we're talking about really is the actual duct itself being cleaned. Even though if you put a new fan, it just wouldn't properly work until we get the duct clean. Yeah. Yes.
Sorry. Going back to that ceiling fan, is there any solution and are there any options or alternatives to be able to fix or address that? Because I know you've mentioned it as a concern. Is there something that would help that situation?
That'll be something I need to bring up to the commissioners and discuss this. How do we proceed with this? It's going to be costly, so it's up to them to decide if we want to go down that path. But this is what we're facing right now, and it's quite an issue because the water, if you look at that shower, when it overflows, that's where it goes to the judge's chambers as well. So we're constantly cleaning that and doing our very best that it doesn't happen. But if we have an emergency, we just can't be everywhere at the exact same time. So it's an issue that we're trying to address. Next slide, please. This one here concerns us dramatically, and the commissioners, they're aware of it, has to do with the roof. But the main reason why it concerns us, anytime it rains hard, there's either the jail commander, myself, or the chief deputy will make a special trip to the jail just to make sure that is still operating and that there's not overflowing, because you can't see it right now. Well, not there, but you can see it up in the picture to my right on top. The left slide, bottom corner, that's a power box. And if that overflows and hits that power box, now we have problems. So for the past couple of days, it's been raining really hard, and we've been very concerned about that. But the commission probably have more information than I do about the roof, how far we are right now to get that repaired. I think we're waiting for the weather to improve before.
We were told May.
May, okay. So, but until then, that's something that concerns us, obviously.
Next slide. We have an update on the window screen since this PowerPoint was put together. Friday, ASI got the extra fabricated pieces to cover the holes that we are cutting in each one. So we have begun this process. C block is the block that we're currently in right now, has been completely done. We're gonna have to go back. It's gonna be kind of a process working through J block to get them out of the cells and give the ASI enough time to get in there. And D block as well we're gonna have to go back and get those done. But now that we have them, that's something that we could move forward and have been moving forward with.
And that's crucial to get that clean, because one of the things we're trying to reduce, we already reduced the actual loudness of that jail because they're now locked down 23 hours a day. And quite frankly, now that we actually sanitize and clean certain blocks, the inmates themselves, the residents themselves, are responsible to keep that clean, so the smell has improved. So I have a feeling once we get rid of that debris that you're looking at right now, hopefully the smell will improve as well.
Well, what we did, to elaborate on what the sheriff's saying, is we cleaned everything. And now we're going through and restoring some of that so that we can maintain it. So what we gave the inmates the opportunity to do was, one, take pride in their space, and they do. We bought scrub brushes. We gave them extra cleaning rags, whereas they did not have that stuff before. We provide them, anytime the water's dirty, it gets switched out so that they can clean again. They take great pride in it. But also, as a facility, we come and clean thoroughly, deep clean once a week. So no matter what the inmates do or do not do, we don't expect them to do everything. We make sure that it's done. But that's kind of the sentiment, the culture that we've done here is we will do these things, we will follow up, we will check and verify that they're done, and continue to do so. And that's rang true with the staff and the inmates themselves. And again, they can't stop talking about how happy they are. And I know that it's jail, and they know that it's jail, but it's a working relationship that is flourishing at this time.
We're over, but that concludes our presentation. We have to entertain any questions.
Thank you.
I want to thank County Council for appropriating the funds that made all these improvements possible, and also for approving the creation of the jail tech position to help maintain all this. I think it will make a difference and has made a difference already. So I thank my County Council colleagues for that.
Has that position been filled?
That position was filled the day that it was given to us. He has been
That
working
is excellent.
nonstop, to the extent of he had to come in at 9 o'clock the other night just to meet with the vent cleaning company in the kitchen, and he made himself available for that as well. He's overworked as well as a result of the sheriff pushing us too hard.
And I know that there's been some problems around some of the window seals, and so it's on our agenda for Wednesday to approve the contract to get the window seals redone on the east side of the jail. So I'm glad to see that being done. It's 6:03.
Sorry,
We have
I don't
more
have
questions,
a question,
yeah.
but
Sure.
I just wanted to thank you for all the work you're doing. I mean, when I walk in the building, it smells so much better just from the work you've already done. So, and I'm sure everybody who's housed up there is appreciative too.
And
Well,
I'm
thank
sure-
you. The staff has done phenomenal, so I can't take all the credit. I'm having a lot of good people around me, but thank you, though.
Even when you get those grills cleaned out behind there, it'll probably improve the air quality as well, because there's probably mites and all kinds of things. Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Can I take one victory lap? I think this presentation shows that we can work collaboratively and that we can work transparently. So I want to thank you for bringing this presentation not only on Saturday, but also today. I know it's extra work and you guys are really busy, so thank you. And thank you for working with us and keeping us informed, because that's how we're going to get this done.
Thank you. We really appreciate the latitudes, but again, we're doing our job, and I'm very blessed to have people around me that do care, and it shows.
Thank you for being here with us today, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks. Thank you.